June 13, 1944. A narrow, rain-slicked lane runs west from the shell-blackened hedgerows outside Saint-Lô. The air tastes of wet iron and diesel. It hangs heavy with the acrid breath of recently fired guns. Morning fog lifts in ragged strips to reveal a line of olive-drab silhouettes crawling over the muddy field. Shermans, M4A3s with their rounded turrets and tired 75mm barrels. Steel beasts with canvas tarps flapping and crews shouting over the roar of engines. Sergeant Michael Mac McKenna, crew chief of Tank 32 in Company B, wipes mud from his goggles, clamps his hand onto the cold periscope, and listens to the crackle over the SCR 508. Advance, advance, hold for infantry. The voice has the clipped cadence of an officer who knows the cost of hesitation. On the other side of the hedgerow, Feldwebel Erich Baum of the 3rd Panzer Reconnaissance Detachment squints through a field glass, heart thudding under wool tunic. He has faced Allied armor before, but not this many. Through the binoculars, the Shermans look almost casual, small, lower profile, inferior, the kind of machine his training told him to despise. Nearby, a Tiger I crouches like a cathedral of steel, its long 88mm gun a dark promise. Hauptmann Wilhelm Kruger, watching from the turret of Panzer IV Schwarz III, counts heads and motions to the radio operator with a languid finger. Report, where are their heavy tanks? He expects the reply he has learned to trust in the Wehrmacht's doctrine: a few Shermans, a handful of Stugs, and the heavy punch of Tigers to pull the teeth out of any Allied push. But doctrine and expectation are brittle things in Normandy. The first Sherman of the morning, Tank 27, driven by Private First Class James Ortiz, takes a grazing hit from a concealed anti-tank gun near a ruined farmhouse. The tracks scream, the engine coughs. Ortiz's loader, Corporal Henry Lowe, shouts as smoke licks the creviced hatch. They abandon the hull. The crew runs, mud sucking at their boots. Feldwebel Baum watches, nods once to himself. A score for the defenders. He does not yet know the full ledger. When Tank 27 burns, it is replaced. Not in a day, not in a week. Within the hour, there is another Sherman clanking into the space the destroyed one left, turrets swiveling as if nothing had happened. Supply sergeants, half a mile to the rear, are already moving. Diesel drums sloshing on flatbeds, spare road wheels clattering as men in dirt-streaked overalls swap them like clockwork. This is the new arithmetic of American war-making. Losses are temporary. Lieutenant Colonel Robert "Bobby" Lane of the 2nd Armored Division stands in a field of mud and watches the line of tanks like a shepherd watches his flock. He feels an odd steadiness, a stubborn, industrial heartbeat beneath the chaos. His men call him by the nickname they've given him for stubbornness and luck. He calls it logistics. As the morning grinds on, the German reconnaissance reports back in alarm. Radio voices on the opposite frequency carry a different tone now, one edged with confusion. They keep coming, and Unteroffizier reports from a crest near the Douve-le-Camp. We destroy 1, 2, 3, another appears. The words sound almost childish, as if disbelief could change steel into straw. For Feldwebel Baum and the crews of the Panzer IV and the solitary Tiger in his sector, disbelief is the first crack in the wall. The Shermans are not miracles on the battlefield. They are nimble but undergunned against the 88. Their 75mm struggles at range, and their armor can be opened like a tin at close quarters. Yet what they lack in single vehicle supremacy, they make up for in number, in the hum and churn of American industry. Each destroyed tank is a small expense in an ocean of production. From the docks of New York to the plants in Detroit and Chicago, men and women, factory foremen like Henry Ford's foreman, and machines work day and night, stamping, welding, riveting, and finally welding again. Corporations have been harnessed into an assembly line of war. Whole towns in the Midwest measure time by the number of engines produced each week. The Sherman is the arithmetic of that economy. Replace, push, repeat. Back in the plowed fields, a young German lieutenant, barely 22 and with a cigarette perpetually crooked between his fingers, walks a line of wrecked Shermans and counts the tracks of their escape. He sees a pattern: tracks that turn, tracks that head for cover, tracks that come from the road he just watched. He realizes with a cold tightening in his chest that the battlefield is beginning to look less like a chessboard where one brilliant strike decides the game, and more like a machine shop where parts are thrown into motion by an invisible hand. His panzer commander's voice on the radio grows terse. Report numbers, request reinforcements, stop their flow. Reinforcements are promised, always, until they are not. At noon, a Sherman column crosses a shallow stream, plunging through the curtain of poplar trees. The sound is contradictory, almost jovial. The clatter of tracks, the thunk of steel on earth, a radio choir of clipped commands and the occasional burst of laughter from a crew that has survived another morning. Sergeant McKenna watches the horizon, imagines the assembly lines he will never see, thinks of his mother folding laundry back home and the factory whistle sounding at dawn. He doesn't know the name of the men running the foundries, but he knows their work by the way the world keeps turning for his crew. On the German side, orders trickle through with increasing urgency. Heavy tank units attempt to concentrate their fearsome 88s and deploy them like anchor points, but the terrain, hedgerow country, favors ambushes and dispersed fighting. A Tiger can stop a column, but it cannot be in every farm lane at once. The Wehrmacht's doctrine of decisive counterattack meets a logistical truth. The Allies can absorb shocks that would have paralyzed other armies. Every time a tank is felled, a replacement rolls up with its crew stamped with the same weary optimism. It is a relentless arithmetic, one that will force adaptations, desperate gambits, and for many German soldiers, a dawning and bitter realization that steel alone will not win a war against a nation that has chosen to outproduce the enemy.
The afternoon sky over Normandy had turned the color of dull pewter. A low ceiling of clouds pressed down on the battlefield, muting the sound of war into a continuous growl. Engines, guns, and the whispering hiss of rain falling through smoke. Feldwebel Erich Baum crouched behind the blackened shell of a barn, binoculars to his eyes, as his commander's Tiger tank took aim down the narrow hedgerow lane. The 88mm KWK-36 cannon barked once, a single thunderclap that shook the air and flattened grass with its concussion. A Sherman, its turret just visible beyond the brush, was hit square in the hull. The round punched through like a god's hammer. The tank erupted in a bloom of orange flame, its turret lid spinning skyward. Baum lowered his binoculars. The men around him let out short, instinctive cheers. They'd seen Tigers work miracles before. "One shot, one coffin," someone muttered. But before the smoke even cleared, another Sherman came into view, and another behind it. The hedgerow trembled under the weight of clanking treads. "Verdammt," Baum whispered. The Tiger's loader slammed another round into the breach, sweat streaking the dust on his face. The second Sherman lurched forward, its gun belching fire. The shell glanced off the Tiger's angled plate, exploding harmlessly into the ditch. The German tank commander called out corrections, voice steady, mechanical. Another round loaded, another Sherman destroyed. And then there was another. And another. By dusk, the Tiger's ammunition racks were nearly empty, its engine howling in protest from the heat. Yet still the American tanks appeared, emerging through hedgerows like steel ghosts. When darkness finally fell, Baum's radio sputtered with exhausted German voices. Out of shells, out of fuel, too many targets. The front line, once so precise in German maps, was beginning to blur. At the same hour, 15 miles behind the line, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Lane studied a clipboard under a lantern in his command jeep. His supply officer, Captain Reynolds, pointed to a list of serial numbers freshly arrived from Omaha Beach. Replacements landed this morning, 18 tanks, 24 more by dawn. Lane rubbed his temples. 18 today, and that's just this sector, he muttered. Back in Detroit, Chicago, and Cleveland, factories worked without pause. The rhythmic pound of press hammers, the crackle of welding arcs, the roar of forges, they were the unseen artillery of the Allied war effort. Every destroyed Sherman on French soil had a twin waiting on a ship. And when that ship reached port, it was unloaded by cranes, fueled, test-driven, and sent to the front often within 48 hours. No other nation in history had waged war this way. To the German infantrymen pinned in a hedgerow, it felt as if the enemy were pulling tanks from the very earth, infinite, mechanical, unstoppable. Feldwebel-Baum's unit fell back under the cover of night, moving by the cold gleam of the moon through lanes slicked with rain. Their Tiger, its paint scorched, its fuel nearly gone, rumbled behind them like a wounded giant. Baum glanced at the passing shapes in the dark, the hollow faces of comrades, the gutted hulls of burned panzers, the wreckage of what had once been a precise, disciplined army. He thought of the briefings in 41 and 42, the speeches of invincibility, the faith in German craftsmanship. The Tigers were marvels, yes, indestructible in single combat, but a marvel could not fight an ocean. Somewhere far across that ocean, American factory lights burned through the night, illuminating workers in coveralls, men and women who'd never seen Normandy, who'd never fired a gun, yet they were winning the battle here, on this muddy road, through the sheer force of production. As Baum settled into a ditch for the night, he heard the distant rumble again, faint but unmistakable. More Shermans. He turned to his radio operator. "Tell command, we need more shells and fuel." The operator didn't look up. "We've already sent 5 requests, sir. They said there's none to send." The Feldwebel sat in silence, rain dripping from his helmet brim. The realization came slowly, like frost creeping across glass. Germany's war machine, once the terror of Europe, was now running on fumes. And still, across the field, American engines growled like a promise that would not die.
By dawn, the rain had stopped. The fields around Saint-Lô glistened with dew, each blade of grass tipped in silver under a bruised, smoky sky. From the high ground, Feldwebel Erich Baum could see the horizon for miles, and it looked wrong. Columns of smoke rose in steady, parallel lines from the east, not the chaotic plumes of burning tanks or villages, but the disciplined exhalation of an army in motion. Through his binoculars, the faint silhouettes of more Shermans, dozens, moved along the tree lines like a slow tide. They were accompanied by armored half-tracks, bulldozers clearing wreckage, trucks hauling spare parts and ammunition. "Mein Gott," someone behind him whispered. It wasn't the number of tanks alone that chilled Baum. It was the organization, the rhythm of the advance. For every destroyed vehicle, there was a crew retrieving the wounded, another towing the wreck, and behind them a column of fresh replacements already rolling forward. The Allies weren't improvising anymore. They were manufacturing momentum. Baum turned toward his Tiger, now silent and still. Its 88 barrel was streaked with soot, its treads caked with mud and oil. The great machine that had once defined German supremacy sat powerless, waiting for fuel that would never come. A dispatch runner appeared over the embankment, panting. "Orders from regiment. We are to hold until reinforcements arrive." Baum's lips tightened. He looked again toward the horizon, where the American tanks crawled steadily closer, sunlight glinting off their rounded hulls. Reinforcements. He didn't laugh. He didn't have the strength, but the word felt cruel in his mouth. There were no reinforcements coming. Across the field, Sergeant Mac McKenna's Sherman rumbled forward, its engine growling like an old dog. Inside, the crew worked in a practiced rhythm, loader calling out, "HE, ready!" Gunner aligning the scope, driver keeping his eyes fixed on the hedgerow slit ahead. They'd lost 3 tanks yesterday. All 3 had been replaced overnight. 2 came in by rail from Cherbourg, 1 off a landing craft at Utah Beach. The new arrivals still smelled of paint and oil, serial numbers not yet scuffed by dust or shrapnel. McKenna didn't think about the men inside those destroyed tanks for long. He couldn't afford to. War taught you to keep your mind on the living machines still moving beside you. "Tiger reported in this sector," the radio crackled. "Copy that," McKenna replied, tapping his map. "We've got 10 Shermans on this flank. That thing can kill us one by one, but we'll keep pushing. Sooner or later, we'll hit it from 3 sides." That was how they fought now. Not as individual tanks seeking glory, but as a swarm, disposable, interchangeable, yet unstoppable. The crew didn't talk of courage or heroism anymore. They talked of timing, supply, fuel, and steel. When the Tiger finally fired from the far ridge, the round slammed into the lead Sherman, Tank 41, turning it into a brief inferno. The crew inside never had a chance. McKenna's gunner swiveled the turret, fired twice, shells bouncing harmlessly off the Tiger's front plate. Then a second Sherman flanked it from the right, and a third came up behind a barn. Smoke grenades burst across the field, white and thick. The Tiger fired again, missed, and the ground beneath it shuddered as artillery landed close. For a moment, the Tiger looked like a stranded beast, magnificent, terrifying, and utterly alone. And then it was gone. The Americans didn't even cheer. The Shermans simply rolled past, engines groaning, tracks grinding over the soft dirt. By late afternoon, the German line was broken. The survivors, infantry and armor alike, fell back in scattered groups, some on foot, some in trucks, some walking beside horses dragging empty fuel drums. Baum's radio sputtered once more before dying completely. The last thing he heard before static claimed the frequency was a desperate voice. "They don't stop coming!" He sat in the wreckage of his command post as Allied artillery boomed in the distance. Around him, the countryside burned with a kind of mechanical rhythm. Shell bursts at intervals, the roar of aircraft circling above, the steady, inevitable advance of armor. For the first time, Baum understood what his commanders would never say aloud. Germany had lost not because her soldiers were weak, nor her tanks inferior, but because she was fighting an enemy that could rebuild faster than she could destroy. As night fell, the battlefield went quiet, except for the low rumble of engines and the creak of cooling steel. McKenna climbed from his tank, boots sinking into the mud. He looked over the field, scattered wrecks, both German and American, lying silent under the stars. He lit a cigarette, the flame trembling in the wind. "Hell of a day," his gunner said softly. "Yeah," McKenna replied, watching a fresh line of Shermans roll in from the east. "And tomorrow's gonna look just like it." He flicked the cigarette away. The ember hit the mud and died instantly. Behind him, the endless column of tanks kept coming.